At Starbound, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or AI slop. In the end, what's HFY without humanity? Subscribe to keep it this way. My name's Chikondi. Let's begin. The universe, for all its grandeur, ran on paperwork. Kevin Hughes subscribed to this principle, as his entire career demonstrated its truth. He sat in his cramped hab pod on Coriolis Hub, a monument to beige modularity, and read the eviction notice glowing on his datapad. The notice was a masterpiece of the form, composed in a font both sterile and condescending. The text detailed rental arrears, contractual obligations, and the imminent, legally sanctioned tossing of his person and possessions into the station's most pungent corridors. His friend Leo's face flickered on the comms panel, a grainy image broadcasting from a much nicer, presumably paid-for hab pod on a higher level. "So, you're getting the boot." "The notice prefers the term domicile reallocation," Kevin said, sipping a lukewarm coffee substitute that tasted of chicory and disappointment. "It's more dignified." "Dignity won't keep the life support humming," Leo pointed out. "Look, I told you, just get a roommate, or find a rich alien spouse. Have you tried that new app? The Concordance is pushing it hard. Matchiverse." Kevin grunted. "The peacekeeping dating app, fostering interspecies harmony one awkward beverage at a time. I'll pass. I struggle enough with interspecies small talk." "Think of it as a compatibility search engine," Leo insisted, his voice crackling with the cheap connection. "The app is the public face of that massive Yenti pet project to genetically catalog every species in the galaxy. The app uses genetic mapping to find someone you might want to keep around. You could find a roommate who actually does their dishes. Or, an Athelian trade baroness with a penchant for slumming it with down-on-their-luck primates." Kevin considered his options. 1. Learn to live in a ventilation shaft. 2. Download an app designed by hyper-bureaucratic, soft-bodied archivists to promote galactic peace through forced mingling. The eviction notice pulsed with gentle impatience. "Fine," he sighed, "but I'm setting my profile to platonic cohabitation only. The impending homelessness is enough rejection for one lifetime." He ended the call, tossing the dregs of his coffee-adjacent beverage into the reclamation unit, and downloaded the app. The logo showed a pair of swirling galaxies gently touching tips. The logo was either profound or obscene. With the soft-bodied Yenti who ran the thing, it was probably both. The Matchiverse profile creation required him to quantify his own dreary existence for a focus-tested user interface. First came the basics: name, species, homeworld. Kevin Hughes, human, Earth. Sector 5G, subsection, generally stable. Then came the personality metrics. On a scale of 1, placid, to 10, berserker rage, how do you respond to minor inconveniences? Kevin put 4. Which of the following best describes your ideal Friday night? A. Raucous celebration of a recent planetary conquest. B. Quiet contemplation of the heat death of the universe. C. Cataloging mineral samples. He selected C with a grimace. The app asked about his hobbies. He typed in, heating foil-wrapped slabs of reconstituted algae, staring at bulkheads, and auditing my life choices. The app's autocorrect changed the last one to stargazing. Close enough. He uploaded a photo where he looked merely exhausted, a significant improvement over his usual state of active decomposition. The final step was the DNA scan. A luminous circle on his datapad screen expanded and contracted with the instruction, "Place primary manipulating digit here for taxonomic verification and compatibility indexing." "Primary manipulating digit," Kevin muttered, pressing his thumb to the cool glass. "Such convoluted language." The lights in his hab pod flickered, dimmed, and surged back with a whine from the power conduit. The datapad in his hands shuddered, a mechanical seizure that vibrated up his arms. A wall of error text in a Yenti dialect that looked like spilled ink cascaded down the screen. The text streamed too quickly to read before resolving into a single, stark message in galactic standard. Taxonomy error. Source sequence detected. Categorization mythological. Then, with a sound like a sad pop followed by a sharp crack, the datapad's battery shorted out. A puff of blue-tinged smoke escaped from the charging port. Kevin eyed the dead device. Shoddy software, he concluded, tossing it onto the sofa. Across the galactic arm, on the Yenti archive world of Yentax, a server farm the size of a small moon overloaded. Every processor fused, and the system's final report, logged in the nanosecond before its demise, was a single, repeating string of corrupted code. When Kevin opened his door for his morning shift, a package waited. The package was a self-contained stasis field, humming with a low thrum that made his teeth ache. Inside, suspended in a cage of undulating blue energy, was a serpent, a magnificent creature thick as his thigh, with scales that caught the light in a hypnotic shift from emerald to amethyst. It also had 3 heads, each frozen mid-snarl, its fangs dripping a viscous black neurotoxin. A delicate bow, fashioned from what looked like cured sinew, encircled the creature's central neck. The package was blank, just a 3-headed venomous reptile in a high-tech preservation bubble. Kevin regarded it. He poked the stasis field with the toe of his boot and felt a solid, humming resistance. He retreated, closed and locked his door, and called station security. The 2 Kesh officers who arrived balanced on 3 spindly legs. They swiveled their heads, a single horizontal lens, a bar of deep crimson bisecting each face. "Unexpected biological parcel," the first officer, whose name tag read Vesh, stated. His partner, Nid, tapped a report into his data slate. "That's a 3-headed snake," Kevin said, feeling the need to clarify. "Acknowledged. Genus Hydraxis malignus," Vesh recited, his crimson legs fixed on the serpent. "Its venom could liquefy a primate's nervous system in 6 seconds. Possession requires a Class 8 dangerous fauna permit. Otherwise, it's a Level 4 infraction." "This isn't mine," Kevin said. "I want to know who sent me a box of instant death." "The parcel is blank," Nid chirped, his gaze fixed on his slate. "The point of origin data is absent. We will log the item and transfer it to the station's biohazard reclamation facility." He finally looked at Kevin. "You will receive a copy of the incident report, Form 75J, within 3 to 5 of the station's 16-hour work shifts." They levitated the stasis field onto a grav cart with practiced, incurious movements. They left in silence, leaving Kevin alone in the corridor. A fundamental rule of the universe, that parcels contained correspondence, not venomous monsters, felt newly fragile. 32 hours later, a pulsating, gelatinous organ arrived, suspended in a simmering preservation gel. It hummed a mournful 6-tone tune that made his Habpod's metal walls vibrate sympathetically. Station security took 4 hours to remove it. A telepathic broadcast hit anyone who came near, making them want to curl up and weep for their lost childhood pet. Then came the skull. The skull was flawlessly polished, the bone buffed to a mirror sheen and inlaid with shimmering silver geometric patterns. A hurried analysis by station security identified it as the skull of the sector governor of the Castillo Verge, whose recent disappearance prompted much speculation. That speculation was now considerably more focused. After the governor's skull, Station Command, citing a little-used public safety ordinance, placed Kevin under mandatory house arrest for his own protection. 2 security guards were posted outside his door. They had the tense posture of zookeepers waiting for the main attraction to start throwing things. Kevin dragged his sofa in front of the door, trusting its mass more than the flimsy lock. The station's automated delivery system, with cold machine logic, now rerouted all packages for Habpod 909 to a reinforced quarantine locker 3 levels down. Kevin received notifications on his new datapad. Your parcel, a still beating heart of a creature from an uncatalogued species, has been safely stored. And your parcel, a ceremonial blade stained with the blood of 19 different species, is ready for pickup. He was the epicenter of a specific, gruesome postal apocalypse. He sat on his sofa barricade, watching old Earth sitcoms, and focused on the screen, tuning out the occasional thud against his door as a harried security detail dropped off another tribute. In an office deep within the Concordance Bureau of Interspecies Harmony's beige heart, Ten's day was perfectly manageable. His caseload contained 3 minor trade disputes, a noise complaint about a supernova-themed party, and a request to reclassify the Narlac mating dance as a spectator sport. Then his console let out a high, keening wail, a sound reserved for events that generate paperwork on a continental scale. A high-priority anomaly. Priority Alpha. His day was about to get complicated. On his main screen, a star chart of the local sector bloomed. Jagged crimson runes, marking the highest threat-level predator species, pulsed. The Vulcan Ascendancy fleet, methodically subjugating a system in an adjacent sector, went silent. The Ashhound packs of the Cinder Wastes abandoned their territorial skirmishes. The psychic entity known as the Whisperer in the Void fell silent, ending its broadcasts of cosmic finality into the minds of passing freighter captains. Each one dropped its activity, ghosted its connections to the NT Grand Consensus Project, the network publicly known as Matchiverse, and plotted a new flight path. The vectors converged on a single point, Coriolis Hub. Ten's 8-jointed fingers, supple as tentacles, flew across the console. His primary optic, a deep, liquid-filled orb, dilated as he cross-referenced data streams. A shockwave of obsession moved through the galaxy's predator networks. One common link emerged, a single, corrupted profile on the census servers for a human data clerk named Kevin Hughes. He pulled up the system's internal report on the DNA scan. The report was heavily redacted, most of the file a visual representation of corrupted data, a repeating digital scream. But one line remained, flagged by the Yenti diagnosticians. Analysis. The subject's mitochondrial DNA bypasses the expected degraded fragments of the primogenitor sequence. It presents the sequence itself, intact, functional. We have miscategorized the theoretical as the extant. A shadow fell over his cubicle. The shadow belonged to his supervisor, Kel, a being who delivered bad news with serene detachment.
"Ten,"
Kel said, his voice a gentle rumble.
"I see you've noticed the anomaly."
"Sir!"
Ten's voice was a little higher than usual.
"The Vulcan have abandoned the conquest. The Whisperer has fallen silent. They are all heading for Coriolis Hub. For a human."
"Indeed,"
Kel said, sliding a data slate onto Ten's desk.
"The Yenti Consensus Project has flagged a living myth. It triggered every predator instinct in their registry. We're invoking the Concordance existential threat mandate. The situation requires a delicate touch and a great deal of form-filling. I'm assigning you the case."
Kel signed the transfer with a flourish.
"Congratulations on the promotion to Senior Case Officer, Incident Response Team. You might want to update your life insurance policy,"
Kel added, his tone bright as he walked away.
"And perhaps pre-fill some of those post-mortem commendation forms. It saves time."
Ten watched him go, then looked back at the screen. The vectors were locked in. The predators were converging. Ten arrived at Kevin's habpod in a full environmental hazard suit, the kind usually reserved for cleaning up minor temporal paradoxes. He was flanked by 2 Concordance security troopers who held their plasma rifles with trembling grips. Kevin spoke to them through the door, which he kept barricaded. "If you have a package, just leave it in the hall. Someone will be by to incinerate it eventually."
"Mr. Hughes,
Ten's voice was tinny through the suit's external speaker.
I am Senior Case Officer 10 of the Concordance Bureau of Interspecies Harmony. We need to talk.
You hear about the governor's skull? Kevin asked. I'm baffled as to how it got here, and I'm pretty sure interstellar mail theft is a serious crime.
Mr. Hughes, this is about your genetic profile, which presents a far greater problem than a single decapitated politician,
10 said, his voice straining. After 15 minutes of negotiation, which mostly involved 10 assuring Kevin that his purpose was strictly informational, the sofa scraped back from the door. It opened a crack. 10 stepped inside, the troopers remaining in the hall. The hab pod was a mess of discarded food containers and stacked data pads. 10 surveyed the room, his internal processors already trying to categorize the chaos.
Your DNA,
10 began, retracting his faceplate,
has fractured galactic taxonomy. It has activated a dormant primal recognition sequence in the genetic memory of nearly every apex predator species in the known galaxy.
Kevin stared at him. That's meaningless to me. 10 took a deep, filtered breath. Directness was his only remaining strategy.
Our xenobiologists were stumped. Your DNA defied classification, but something in it connected. Every predator recognized you.
Recognized me as what? Kevin asked, his voice a mixture of confusion and dread. An easy meal?
The opposite, Mr. Hughes.
10 paused.
They seek to prove their worthiness to you. To them, your genetic sequence marks you as a mythological figure, a creature from their most ancient legends, the first hunter, the primogenitor, the original monster under the bed.
Kevin sank onto his sofa. Oh, good. The first true sign of the problem's scale announced itself by sliding out of the void. The ship was a Vulcan dreadnought, the Honor's Blade, a vessel whose silhouette was a familiar sight in conquered systems and on Concordance watchlists. Station-wide lockdown alerts blared, a cacophony of sirens and automated warnings that sent the citizens of Coriolis Hub scrambling for designated shelters. The broadcast that followed was a proclamation, delivered in a deep, resonant voice that vibrated through the station's superstructure.
I am Matriarch Helica of the Vulcan Ascendancy,
the voice boomed.
I have come to court the one you call Hughes, the primogenitor.
In station command, officers exchanged wide-eyed looks. 10, monitoring from Kevin's hab pod, felt his third utility arm snap out from a compartment in his torso. It polished his already immaculate data slate with frantic, repetitive motions.
I present my first offering,
Helica's voice continued.
My fleet has captured the rogue planetoid designated RX-774, an asset rich in heavy metals recently detected in this system's outer belt. I have retired its defenders. I have renamed it Kevin's Folly and cede all territorial and mineral rights to the primogenitor.
The station fell silent.
I expect a prompt reply,
the voice continued. The broadcast ended. On Sen's slate, alerts flooded in. Treaty violations, unsanctioned military action in a neutral zone, illegal seizure of celestial assets, aggressive nomenclature. He would need a bigger slate. She gave me a moon? Kevin asked, his voice a whisper. She gave me a moon and named it after my own foolishness? That seems a little passive-aggressive. 10's utility arm polished the slate faster, a frantic motion of pure procedural panic. While 10 frantically tried to explain to Station Command the futility of blowing up the Vulcan warship, Kevin sat alone in his hab pod. The alarms and announcements outside were a distant hum. The chaos inside his head was far more immediate.
A lonely sound,
a voice whispered directly inside his skull.
The turning of a billion worlds. I can show you the silence between them.
Kevin jolted and looked around the empty apartment. Who's there?
A poor question.
The voice continued, a layered chorus of whispers that echoed in the space behind his eyes.
What is more interesting? When is more precise? I am the whisperer in the void.
The air in front of him warped like heat haze on a summer road, folding the room's fabric.
The warrior queen offers you rock and dust,
The whisperer said.
a crude gift. I offer you truth, a more intimate tribute.
My current needs lean more towards a strong lock and some peace and quiet than cosmic truth, Kevin said, backing away.
Listen!
The whisperer insisted. A piece of information bloomed in Kevin's mind. He knew with absolute certainty that his next-door neighbor, a quiet Yelna pollinator named Polly, despised the 20th century Earth rock music Kevin sometimes played. Polly considered it auditory barbarism and had filed 3 formal noise complaints that were still working their way through the station's bureaucracy.
A small gift,
The whisperer hummed.
to demonstrate my sincerity. Accept my embrace, primogenitor, and I will show you truths that would fracture your perception of reality. The true name of a dying star, the color of the sound from the end of time, the reason for it all.
Kevin pressed his hands to his ears, a futile gesture against a voice already inside his head. Helica offered conquest. The whisperer offered cosmic dread. Finding a roommate was a much more complicated process than he had been led to believe.
This,
Ten said, gesturing with one of his primary arms at a holographic projection of a Vulcan dominance ritual,
violates every established concordance protocol for romantic entanglement.
Protocol was a burning ship, so Ten had hunkered down with Kevin. Habpod 909 was now the command center for the galaxy's most bizarre diplomatic crisis. Ten had requisitioned a direct line to the Concordance Xenodata archives, and they were engaged in a crash course on how to avoid being murdered by obsessive alien suitors. The hologram showed 2 Vulcan warriors in a brutal bladed duel.
The Vulcan courting process involves escalating tributes and challenges.
Ten explained, his voice clipped and academic.
The suitor presents gifts of increasing value, conquered territories, heads of rivals, strategically important nebulae, to prove their strength and resourcefulness.
So the moon was just an opening bid, Kevin said, rubbing his temples.
Precisely. If the intended accepts the gifts, it signals a willingness to entertain the courtship. If rejected, the suitor may interpret it as a challenge to their honor, which typically results in, well, this.
Ten gestured to the hologram, where one warrior now disemboweled the other. And the Whisperer? Kevin asked. Ten's single optic dimmed.
More problematic. The Whisperer in the Void is a Class 8 psychic entity. From a bureaucratic standpoint, the entity is a nightmare, existing outside of physical address, legal designation, or taxation. Our archives on its customs are thin.
He pulled up a file containing a single entry. A void. So one wants to kill for me, and the other one wants to give me an aneurysm with forbidden knowledge, Kevin summarized. Wonderful. He looked at the mountain of data Ten sorted. Has anyone ever tried just talking to them? Sending a polite message asking them to stop? Ten's 8-jointed fingers stilled. His long, flexible neck swiveled, his primary optic focusing on Kevin. The concept was so simple, so completely removed from the millennia of ritualized violence and psychic intimidation he reviewed. It was a piece of data that defied categorization.
A conversation?
Ten whispered, as if the word itself were a foreign artifact.
Mr. Hughes, that is an extraordinarily novel approach.
He typed, creating a new subfile in the case directory. He labeled it simply the Hughes method. The station commander, a gruff Solhjorn with the disposition of a cornered grump weasel, insisted Kevin respond to Helica. The Vulcan dreadnought's presence was collapsing docking schedules, stagnating trade, and spiking the station's collective anxiety levels into the red. 10, armed with his newfound appreciation for Kevin's straightforward worldview, drafted a diplomatic response. The response was a masterpiece of bureaucratic language, featuring phrases like deeply appreciate the sentiment, under advisement, and pending a review of the territorial and ecological implications spanning several fiscal periods. Kevin read it. This sounds like you're putting her on hold.
That is the intention,
10 said.
The message should delay any further gifting for at least 2 fiscal quarters.
They broadcast the message from a secure channel. Kevin read the script, his voice flat. The response from the Honor's blade was almost immediate. Helica's voice boomed across the comms again, now sharp with excitement.
A test! The primogenitor tests my honor with riddles and delays! A worthy challenge!
The transmission cut, and the station's long-range sensors detected the Vulcan fleet powering up main weapons, presumably to go conquer something even bigger in his name. Okay, Kevin said, his composure cracking. New plan! He pushed 10 aside, grabbed the comm panel, and reopened the channel. Matriarch Helica, this is Kevin Hughes! His voice was clear and plain. I appreciate the planetoid. It's a thoughtful gesture, but the planetoid is little practical use to me. It's too big. The commute would be a nightmare, and it is a security risk. A simple fruit basket would have been fine. Thank you for the offer, but I must decline. He cut the transmission. 10 gawked at him. He had just witnessed a human reject a planet-sized tribute from one of the galaxy's most feared warlords on the grounds of inconvenient logistics. Aboard the Honor's blade, Matriarch Helica listened to the recording a third time. Her warriors awaited the order to obliterate the station for this insult. Helica, however, felt intrigue. This was a critique of her strategy, presented as a rejection of her strength, a challenge of practicality over might. The primogenitor was more subtle than she had imagined. This was a puzzle she had to solve. For a full 5 minutes, the Vulcan fleet held its position and stayed silent. The Vulcan's thoughtful silence emboldened the other suitors. In the following shifts, Coriolis Hub became a stage for competitive chaos. A sentient swarm of microconstructs from the RAX arm left a gift at his door. They located a nearby maintenance drone, disassembled it atom by atom, and reassembled it into a detailed sculpture of Kevin's own terrified face, balanced on a single molecular point and buckling the corridor's gravity plating. 10 filed it under Form 1138-C, unexpected artistic vandalism. Soon after, a pack of Mornus hunters from the Shadow Nebulae arrived. Their tribute was action. They methodically stalked the station's security patrols, viewing them as weaklings to be culled from the primogenitor's new territory. Guard rotations became a game of hide-and-seek, and the janitorial staff complained about the ichor stains on the corridor walls. Messages flooded Tem's comms. The chittering court of Kur offered to infest the station's ventilation systems in his honor. A silicon-based life form from a high-gravity world promised to carve Kevin's likeness onto a local moon. 10's desk disappeared under digital incident reports. A nervous tic developed in his utility arm. He dreamt in triplicate. The chaos peaked when a delegation from the Chromian dynasty arrived. Beings of pure energy, their idea of a tribute was to flood the station's power core with their own energy, overriding its regulators. Every light on the station flickered in time to an unsettling war hymn, and the automated food synth dispensers dispensed only a single quivering purple substance that tasted of ozone. The Whisperer's intrusions became more frequent and personal. It whispered critiques of his daily routine.
You missed a spot cleaning the nutrient resequencer.
It hummed in his mind as he tried to do his dishes.
The resulting bacterial colony will achieve sentience in 3 shifts. They will develop a distinct animosity toward you.
Kevin was trying to read a report 10 had given him, a frantic plea from the station's chief engineer, who had narrowly avoided being gifted to Kevin by a particularly enthusiastic suitor who believed a skilled technician was the ultimate tribute, when the Whisperer's voice filled his head again.
The engineer is a triviality. His understanding of temporal mechanics is rudimentary. I can offer you the secret to unraveling space-time itself. A simple twist of thought, and you could reverse the spill of your morning coffee, or prevent the birth of a star.
Kevin slammed the datapad on the table. He took a deep breath and yelled at the empty room. "Get out of my head!" he roared, his voice raw with frustration. "I have had it with the riddles and the cosmic horror and the commentary on my housekeeping. Oh, my tolerance for existential dread is exhausted. Come back when you have an appointment and file the request in triplicate." The warped distortion in the air vanished. The psychic pressure in his skill evaporated. The only sounds were the gentle hum of the station's life support and his own ragged breathing. He had yelled at a timeless, bodiless entity, and it had worked. A small, triumphant smile formed on his lips. He was getting the hang of this. The peace in orbit was fragile. Helica's fleet remained. Soon other ships arrived. Sleek, dark Mornis vessels slid through sensor nets. A flotilla of incandescent chromium energy spheres gave off waves of oppressive heat. A hulking, brutalist crag vessel shouldered its way into high orbit, broadcasting challenges in a language that sounded like a rockslide. They held a standoff, a cold war of posturing and threats. Each faction vied for the honor of being the first to formally present themselves and their increasingly extravagant gifts to Kevin. The thin line of Concordance cruisers tasked with maintaining peace was outmatched, their captains sending panicked messages to Penn, who could only file them under impending orbital warfare. A war was about to break out over Coriolis Hub, between some of the most dangerous species in the galaxy. All of it centered on an unemployed data clerk from Earth who just wanted to pay his rent. Kevin and Ten huddled in the hab pod, which Ten had, through a series of desperate requisitions, upgraded to a makeshift command center. A large holographic display showed the orbital traffic map. The warship icons, jagged crimson runes, blinked like a swarm of angry wasps. Ten was composing a final report for his supervisor, titled, "An Account of the Complete Collapse of Diplomatic Protocol in the Face of a Mythological Recognition Event." He was also drafting his own posthumous commendation for efficiency. Kevin stared at the blinking runes. He saw past the warships to the logistical nightmare they represented. An organizational disaster. A scheduling conflict of apocalyptic proportions. A familiar problem. He would apply the soul-crushing logic of middle management to a problem of epic, violent passion. "Ten," he said, his voice calm, "I'm going to hold a meeting." Ten's long neck stiffened. His utility arm, idly sorting casualty projection reports, froze.
A meeting?
"Yes," Kevin said, turning from the map. "A mandatory all-hands meeting. It's time to establish some ground rules." Ten stared at him. The human was proposing to solve an impending multi-fleet war with a calendar invite. This was either the most brilliant or the most pathetic strategic gambit in galactic history. Ten found himself willing to bet on the former. The Hughes method had a proven track record. Kevin's message was broadcast on all channels, patched directly into the comm systems of every Predator ship in orbit. His face appeared on their main view screens, looking tired but resolute. He sat at the small table in his hab pod, a mug of the quivering purple substance in his hand, looking like a man about to give a deeply unenthusiastic quarterly review. "Good morning," he began, his tone level. "This is Kevin Hughes. We need to talk about the current situation. It has come to my attention that there is some confusion regarding the appropriate protocols for courtship. So I've drafted a new set of guidelines. Please consider them effective immediately. A baffled silence fell upon the bridges of a dozen warships. First, Kevin said, taking a sip from his mug, all unexpected biological gifts are forbidden, especially organs. It's a health risk, a biohazard, and the station's reclamation crews are threatening to unionize. From now on, a curated list of acceptable gifts will be available. Think high-quality coffee beans or gift vouchers. Prioritize items that remain whole. He paused. Second, all disputes for my attention will be settled via a formal challenge system. A tournament bracket structure will be used because violence is inefficient and creates too much collateral damage. I'm posting the schedule and the sign-up sheet on the station's public network. Initial rounds will consist of creative contests. I'm thinking competitive baking or perhaps poetry slams. He looked directly into the camera. Third, this is a firm policy. Property damage. Any action resulting in damage to Coriolis Hub or its personnel will mean immediate disqualification from the tournament. The insurance paperwork is a nightmare. He finished with a simple closing. Thank you for your cooperation. A full memo detailing these new procedures will be distributed shortly. Hughes out. The transmission ended. On the bridge of the Honor's Blade, Matriarch Helica regarded the blank screen. Her second-in-command turned to her, his metallic bristles raised.
Matriarch, your orders? This is mockery.
Helica was silent for a long moment. Then a low rumble formed in her chest, a sound like a deep chuckle.
No,
she said, her voice holding a newfound deference.
This is genius, presented as mockery.
She saw it clearly, the rejection of her planetoid, the dismissal of brute force, the imposition of rules. His method was predation on a conceptual level. To control a dozen warring fleets with scheduling and rulemaking showed a mind so ancient it viewed their entire warrior culture as an administrative problem to be optimized.
He has challenged us to a battle of logistics, a higher form of combat, she declared.
She turned to her comms officer.
Open a channel to the primogenitor station. Inform him that the Vulcan Ascendancy accepts his terms, and sign me up for the baking competition. My blood spice cookies are legendary.
Her acceptance triggered a cascade of compliance. The other factions, baffled but compelled to match the Vulcan's move, fell in line. The mourners, after a brief debate, announced they would submit a haunting dirge for the poetry slam. The Crag, seeing a bracket system they could dominate, roared their approval. The standoff ended. In Habpod 909, Fen watched the jagged crimson runes on his screen fade, replaced by placid green confirmation markers. The threat of war had vanished. He looked at Kevin, who had just pacified a flotilla of killers with a sign-up sheet and a strongly worded memo. Fen's procedural world had shattered, replaced by a new, terrifying, and strangely efficient reality. He picked up his data slate and drafted a new concordance-wide protocol. He called it Conflicts De-Escalation via Aggressive Bureaucracy. The Hughes method was going galaxy-wide. Weeks passed. A new, strange calm settled over Coriolis Hub. Two hulking Vulcan warriors, clad in ceremonial armor, now stood guard outside Kevin's Habpod, functioning as receptionists and checking appointments. Kevin spent his days fielding courtship applications, mediating disputes between beings that could shatter planets, and judging the occasional poetry competition. The mourner's dirge about the fleeting nature of life as seen through the eyes of a dying star was a surprise hit, though it had made the judging panel cry for 3 hours straight. The concordance had made Ten's position permanent. He was now officially Kevin's Royal Chamberlain, a title that came with a significant pay rise and a staggering amount of paperwork. He was perfectly content. Kevin sat at his table, looking over his datapad. An alert popped up. His rent was still due. Some things remained constant. He sighed, then a slow smile spread across his face. He opened a secure channel to the Honor's blade. "Matriarch Helica," he said, his voice smooth and businesslike. "Kevin Hughes here. About that planetoid you offered me. I've been thinking. Perhaps we could talk about its mineral rights. I have a proposal that I think you might find very compelling." A roommate eluded him, but he would still make rent, one way or another.